Our focus is on providing IT and engineering services to the federal government. It started out originally with our first acquisition supporting mostly the intelligence and defense communities. So it was mostly classified work supporting DoD and three-letter agencies. We're principally dependent on government contracts. So I would say 95% of our work is supporting the federal government and about 5% is commercial. There's not a whole lot we can do, unfortunately, to prepare for sequestration because there's really been no guidance coming out of the federal government relative to how sequestration will be actually implemented. It comes out in bits and pieces. So we know, for instance, that the president has exempted the military members. So we know that generally things dealing with supporting them is probably going to continue to be sustained. We have every expectation to believe that things that are put on contract by the beginning of 2013, the government fiscal year, so by 1 October, will probably be allowed to run their course, probably. But we know that their sequestration will mandate some amount of cuts. Our approach really, because of the level of uncertainty, is to be a bit more cautious in terms of the way we prepare for the future. Where we might ordinarily spend on maybe investing in some technology in advance of a government requirement, or bring on some people maybe in advance of a particular program, now we're much more cautious about doing that. So we're more apt to withhold future hiring and wait until we have a real true hard need for it. Our expectation is that we will find some way to grow, but it may be a quarter, 2 quarters of of delay in some of that until we figure out the impact of sequestration. If you recall, sequestration imposes a 10% cut sort of across the board in terms of programs. It's not even clear right now if that impact affects government workers. Will there be 10% layoffs in the federal government workforce? I mean, we know that the president has exempted the military, but as far as I know, he hasn't exempted anybody else. So, will our program offices that we support, that manage the work we do, will they be impacted? How's that going to impact our work? There's so much uncertainty, it's almost impossible to plan for. Frankly, the one thing that would help us more than anything would be a clear program by program definition of how sequestration is going to unfold. The only thing we can assume is that every program will suffer a 10% impact, but there's been no planning that we've seen from program level down as to how those cuts would be administered. So that would be helpful. If the customers were to say, if this happens, this is what we would do, that would be helpful. That would allow us to do some pre-planning in advance of that. I still have an expectation that somehow between now and the end of the lame duck session, before we get to January, there will be some resolution that, if nothing else, at least pushes sequestration off a year to provide the administration time to really manage through the problem. So I'm still believing that Congress will find a path to at least kick the can down the road. I'm not a big fan of kicking the can, but in this particular case, kicking the can is much better than across the board 10% reduction to federal spending. I think that's irresponsible.